So what aspects of traditional web design or traditional user experience don't apply to mobile?
Well, I think the design as a practice or as a process is sort of the same across all of it, right? It's problem solving under certain constraints and with certain goals, which is very abstract, I realize. But so what's different on mobile is that the constraints are different, arguably a little bit tighter in some ways. So there are two examples that come to mind immediately. One is that the screens are so much smaller,
Sure.
right? So a lot of the comfortable or best practice patterns that people use on the desktop, a lot of categories down the side, things you want to draw attention to right up top that maybe aren't related to the critical task at hand, don't really work. You really have to pare things down to what your app or website is, what the most important goal of the thing is. You've really either pare down what you have or ideally start afresh. You start from scratch. The other is that typing, there's not a mobile device so far that's been created that is really wonderful for typing, right? The spectrum is okay to terrible.
Sure.
So there's a lot you have to think about there. Minimize input wherever you can. If people need to log in, find some way for them to do that doesn't require entering a lot of strange symbols. Let people tap on suggestions rather than having to enter a lot of data.
Right. So kind of along those lines, can you point to some specific examples of effective mobile design?
Sure, yeah. One that is very dear to my heart, as I work for Mozilla and we're really into the whole open web app concept using web technologies. One thing I love is the Gmail app, the Gmail web app for the iPhone, which has had a great record as arguably a better mail client than the native one on the iPhone for a long time, and they're using a lot of really cool open web technologies to do it. Another that I really like is the Kindle, actually. So, I love the hardware ebook itself, but they really seem to have understood that mobile usage is really about a constellation of devices, right? It's not just about the one phone you have. It's being able to read at home on your ebook, but then read on your Android phone when you're on the train, or pick up your iPad when you're elsewhere. And that kind of consistency of getting at your stuff across a bunch of devices, I think, is a really great insight. And the last one is something called Flipboard. Where they, again, have sort of understood how people are using some of these emerging technologies like Twitter as a protocol more than a service. It's this insight that people aren't using it so much as an email replacement, though some people are, as a way of reading a newspaper.
Sure. So last question I have for you, and it touches a little bit on the first question as well. Do you think that we'll get to a point where we don't type on mobile devices? That won't be the input mechanism.
So I think we're heading in the direction of doing a lot more sort of talking to the internet, right? Google had an example with their 1-800-GOOG, I forget what the exact number was, where you could ask a question, which would be great in parts of the world where smartphones are not yet a thing that a lot of people have. But you just have to watch that person on the bus who's yelling into their cell phone to know that talking to a device is not always the answer, right?
Sure.
Sometimes you need a little bit, or should have, a little bit of privacy.
Right. Well, thank you very much for being with us.
Oh, my pleasure.